I'm sure you've realized how profitable HMOs can be, especially if you've been watching any of my previous vlogs. Making £1,000 a month from a single house is not unusual. However, there are many mistakes that you can make as an investor and a landlord in HMOs. In this video, I want to share with you the 5 biggest mistakes that you must avoid if you're doing HMOs. Hi, I'm Saj Hussain, and if you're new to my channel, this is where I share with you my 15 years of investing knowledge and experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your property investing journey. And if you'd like more videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you get notified when I'm releasing videos just like this. So I've been investing in HMOs for about 10 years now in and around Birmingham, and I've made many mistakes during that time. And here I'm picking out the 5 key ones that I want to share with you, but make sure you watch all the way to the end because I have a bonus one for you as well. The first and biggest mistake that I see being made is not understanding the customer and their needs. So what do I mean by the customer? Well, the customer is ultimately the person that's going to be paying you each month, i.e. your tenant. The tenant that's going to be living in the property and what it is that they're looking for, what their needs are, as opposed to what you want. You want cash flow, you want a nice house, you want it kept tidy. But is it what your tenants are looking for in terms of what you're creating? When I'm speaking to potential investors and landlords or already in property and they're looking to do HMOs, and I'm asking what type of customer you're creating this property for, and the most common answer I get is professional tenants. And I say, why? Why do you want professional tenants? Well, I want professional tenants because they look after the property, they're nice people, they'll pay the rent on time. Yeah, most probably that is the case, but actually it doesn't necessarily mean that that model works everywhere. It's getting the right type of property set up for the right type of tenant is really important. For instance, the house that we're in now is a 6-person house share. We were just in the kitchen, kept nice and tidy for 6 people. They're all professional tenants, they're all at work. This room has just become available. In fact, it became available yesterday, and the new tenant is moving in tomorrow. So we had a little window of opportunity to do some filming at this house to show you how I set up my house shares. So most of our tenant portfolio is professional tenants, what I call white collar, and also a mixture of some blue collar, which I'll show you in a few moments. The other type of house shares we have, a blue collar one. So for example, this is a white collar one, and I'll show you the difference that we have on the blue collar one, but they're still working tenants. However, what I don't have is house shares for, say, students. I don't have house shares that have people that are not working, that are, say, on benefits predominantly. I don't have house shares for, say, asylum seekers. Why? Because I've chosen to niche in that particular category, but that also means we really understand the customer and their needs. Right now, we've come across to another professional house share. However, this one is mostly blue collar tenants, whereas the one we just came from was white collar tenants. So what's the difference? Well, although they're both professional house shares, or what we term as professional house shares, which mean primarily our tenants are all working tenants, the white collar tenants tend to be those on a higher salary, and the ones on a blue collar, or what we term as blue collar, will be those on a slightly lower salary. So for example, these rooms are very similar in terms of size, the one we just saw and the one we're in now. However, the one we just came from is probably about a third, 30-ish% more expensive than this one that we're in right now. This one doesn't have the ensuite room either. We've also come across to this house to talk about mistake number 2, which is getting the location right of the house. So I see many investors purchasing a property because the numbers look amazing, the floor plans look fantastic. However, they haven't considered, is it the right location for the type of customer that they're trying to attract? Here, right now, we are just on the peripheries of a very expensive and desirable location, which we talked about in the last vlog, which we'll link up here. Now here, we're probably maybe 50 yards from the boundary of a different postcode, which means we can still benefit from the higher prices that are achieved in that location over there versus if we went, say, another half a mile in that direction within the same postcode, we would not get anywhere close to the same prices or attract the type of tenants that we normally have in a house like this. So getting the location right is fundamentally important, because if you're, for example, targeting students, you're going to have to be very close to a university, but that's not enough in itself. Close to the university, you'll have primary, secondary and tertiary locations. Your primary locations are, you literally fall out of bed and within 5 minutes you're at the university gates. If you've got maybe a 10 or 15-minute walk, that would be a secondary location, and a tertiary location may be a 20-minute plus walk or a bus ride. Now, if we just take Birmingham, for example, and how that's evolved over the years, there's so many purpose-built student blocks that are now being built, which has damaged the tertiary market and sucked up a lot of the demand that was in the primary and secondary. So the tertiary properties are now having to be repurposed because they're actually too far from who their primary customer was, which is essentially students. So here with our professional housing, we think about who is the main employer, who are the big employers. So in Birmingham, we're fortunate, we've got lots of big employers, but if you're looking at a location where you are dependent on working tenants, you think about where is it that they're working, how can that market change? So for instance, one of the big employers in Birmingham is JLR, Jaguar Land Rover. However, if we were completely dependent on that one only employer, and if there was a change that they made, which sometimes big companies do, that can completely destroy our business model. So it's important that you've got more than one customer type in the location that you're thinking that makes the model work. So having transport links nearby, so whether it's buses, trains, tubes, or whatever it might be, trams, and there may be facilities for parking, or be able to drive straight into the location that they need to get to work-wise. All of these things are important for your tenants. It's really about putting yourself in the shoes of the tenants and what they might be looking for, and looking through this through their eyes rather than yours. If you're finding these useful so far, let me know what you think the biggest mistake people make within HMOs. Put it down in the comment section below, and make sure you're hitting that subscribe button as well so you're getting more of these kind of videos. So let's jump into mistake number 3 that I see being made, and that's the lack of understanding around planning and also licensing, and also understanding that they're two very different things. So right now in this house that we're in, this is a 7-person HMO which is licensed and it has planning classification of sui generis. So what that means, it's got a special planning classification right now, so it can have more than 6 people, because once you've gone beyond 6, it has a different category, but also requires a license for it to be suitable for that number of people. We've now come across to a different house with another similar sized room. However, in this house, we don't have planning permission and we don't have a license. So that's just to confuse you, right? Well, let me explain what I mean. This is not unusual for it to be a misconception around licensing and planning. So let's try and break that down. First of all, let's look at them in isolation. With planning permission, if you have up to 6 people living in the same house, i.e. from 1 to 6 people or 2 to 6 people in the same house are unrelated to each other, then that's normally done without requiring any planning permission. So you can take what's a family house, which is a planning classification of C3, move it across to C4 with no planning required. However, if you decide to have more than 6 people, then its planning classification needs to change from C3 or C4 to sui generis, which means more than 7 people or more, and normally a planning classification of its own. This is generally speaking. However, your local authority might have what's called Article 4. And Article 4 is the removal of certain permitted development rights. Permitted development rights are being able to do modifications to, say, a house without going through the full planning process. So what we just talked about, moving from C3 to C4, can be done under permitted development rights with no planning required. However, if you go to 7 people, then you need planning permission. Unless, as I mentioned, there's Article 4, then in that case, if you've got 3 unrelated people, you would need to apply for planning. So Birmingham, for example, has recently implemented even Article 4 into the area, which means now if we're creating any more houses like this one here with 4 people in it, it would require planning permission, because this one was set up before the date kicked in, which was in June. It has what's called grandfather rights. It doesn't require planning permission. The cost of a license application can vary from about £500 to £1,500 depending on your local authority. It's really important to understand when a license might be required, when planning is required, or sometimes where both are required as well. In fact, if you think it would be useful, let me know in the comment section below and I can do a separate video talking more specifically about planning and also about licensing, because there's different types of licensing as well. Mistake number 4 that I see being made is a lack of understanding around how much management HMOs actually require. They are much more intensive than, say, a family let, a single let, or a flat. So these things need to be considered. So what I tend to see is people fall into 2 camps. Either they tend to abdicate their responsibility, dump it on somebody, maybe a managing agent, and just not interested because they want the passive income, or they're on this side where they're over controlling and micromanaging the process and almost being a mother hen in the house. So it's important to get a balance in terms of recognizing first of all how much work is involved in managing a HMO, and then ensuring you've got the right people to manage that house. So what I did a number of years ago when I couldn't find the right people is to set up our own HMO specialist letting agency to manage properties, where we've managed over 500 rooms around Birmingham. This not only gives us the expertise around managing these type of properties, but also the data in terms of where the demand is, what requirements are, what the price points are as well. Let's now talk about mistake number 5. However, just before we do that, I've got a bonus one for you, number 6, which we'll talk about in a few moments, so make sure you watch all the way to the end. So what's mistake number 5? Mistake number 5 is failing to do thorough due diligence on your potential applicant or the potential tenant that's going to be living in the house. It's really important not only to do the basic financial checks like the credit check and the employment check like many agents and landlords do. However, you want to see the person's going to be a good fit for the other people that are living in the house, because ultimately, remember, it's a shared house. One of the other things that we do in terms of financial checks is not just a basic credit check, because sometimes they won't tell you a great deal, particularly if somebody, for example, let's say they're a doctor, they've been in the country 3 months, they've just arrived, they're going to have a great income, but they're not going to have a credit history, so they fail a credit check. You need to take a common sense approach about your individual applicant and make sure you interview them to understand them and see if they're going to be a good fit. One of the things that we tend to do is ask for 3 months of bank statements, and what that does tells you a huge amount about the individual, how they manage their finances, how they've been paying their rent on time previously, and also the income that they're getting as well, so you can ensure that they can afford the rent. We're back in the office now with bonus mistake number 6, but just before we do that, let me know what you think of the mistakes that we shared so far. If there's any other ones you think should have been on the list, make sure you put it in the comment section below. And if you like this video, then make sure you hit that like button and of course subscribe as well, so that you're getting notified when we're doing these videos. So let's just jump straight into mistake number 6, your bonus one here, and that's scrimping on the internet connection. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you remember dial-up, that's what some people's internet connection is like. And potential tenants and applicants these days, the quality of the internet is so important. They might be working from home, they might be using for gaming, there'd be all kinds of things that they're looking to use the internet for, and you've got maybe 4, 5, 6 people on that same connection. And I see people looking for the cheapest possible connection. I think what you should be looking for is the best possible connection you can. So we typically spend about £50 and we look for the fastest connection available on that street. So then when it's shared, not only download, but upload speeds as well, so that you don't get any complaints about the quality of the internet. I thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again next week on next week's vlog.